As Donald Trump arrived in the Netherlands for the annual North Atlantic Treaty Organization Summit, the American president anticipated celebrating the success of the preemptive military strikes he had approved against Iranian nuclear sites. However, as often happens with the Republican leader, reality soon intervened. On Tuesday, a preliminary intelligence assessment from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency was made public, sparking widespread debate. According to NBC News, the initial assessment concluded that the U.S. airstrikes were not as effective as Trump claimed, setting Iran's nuclear program back by only 3 to 6 months. The day after this assessment was released, the president responded in his characteristic manner. NBC News reported that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed Trump's comments. It was noted by the New York Times that Trump has been closely monitoring which members of his administration use the specific language he prefers. There were several key issues with the Republicans' rhetoric at his NATO press conference, starting with his contradictory statements. When questioned about the mission's efficacy and the intelligence's accuracy, Trump stated, "The intelligence was very inconclusive. The intelligence says we don't know. It could have been very severe. That's what the intelligence says, so I guess that's correct. But I think we can take the, we don't know. It was very severe. It was obliteration." The first part of his response conflicted with the second. Intelligence cannot be both conclusive and inconclusive simultaneously. If Trump wants to assert that it's too early to have a definitive understanding of the strike's success, that's acceptable. However, when he simultaneously claims that the U.S. doesn't know for sure whether Iran's nuclear sites were obliterated, and that they were indeed obliterated, his statements become difficult to believe. Later, at the same event, Trump mentioned that U.S. intelligence officials really don't know the full extent of what happened to the Iranian targets, before adding moments later, "I believe it was total obliteration." In other words, according to the American president, U.S. intelligence officials don't know, but he does. The Republican continued by criticizing several American news organizations as scum, likely because they reported that Trump misled the public by exaggerating the operation's success, a report that the president more or less confirmed when he said, "We don't know whether the mission was a complete success," while simultaneously claiming otherwise. Even by Trump standards, this situation has become perplexing. On one hand, the president wants the public to believe that the Iranian targets were completely and totally obliterated and completely destroyed, as part of one of the most successful military strikes in history. On the other hand, he also wants the public to believe that the intelligence on the mission was very inconclusive, and that the United States simply doesn't know, despite an initial assessment that contradicts Trump's claims. In recent months, the Republican has developed a reputation for dishonesty, recklessness, and expressing indifference toward his own country's intelligence. The narrative surrounding the Iranian strikes he approved has quickly reached a point where Trump is exemplifying all these traits simultaneously.